Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumberger channel. This is of course the show where each week we take a dive into, an album of some sort that's just, waiting to be heard, I guess. And so in today's episode, as you can no doubt guess, is another dive into the Gerogerigegege, Japan's ultra shit band, led by the renowned Juntaro Yamanouchi, of course. Well known, for their caustic bombardment of noise, essentially. However, in today's episode, though, we're actually looking at what I think is an incredibly unusual album within their discography, and I think is actually genuinely very good in a non-ironic way, and really worth listening to if you actually enjoy experimental ambient field recordings, I would say. So yep, today we are looking at the 2019 release of D Crescendo. So, of course, in our episode covering the Gerogerigegege, no need to mention who they are, we've mentioned them in the first episode. But yeah, we're taking a look at a more modern album, going up to 2019 with D Crescendo, which is, as mentioned, a really unusual album within the band's discography, as it's arguably one of the most gentle and relaxing compositions the man has ever come up with, I feel. And comprised of field recordings and performances of hapi drums, D Crescendo just quietly murmurs away for 40 minutes, just offering this incredibly odd little audio snapshot of a local Japanese park just before dawn. And throughout these recordings, you're just getting these really gentle ambient tones from the drum, offset by just the world existing all around Juntaro in the early hours of the morning, The cicadas ringing and trilling away, cars and trucks starting their early commutes, the birds just slowly waking up, But what's interesting is, the more this album progresses, the quieter the drums become. A literal decrescendo in the improvisational composition. And it's all just really oddly pleasant, which makes it very unusual for Juntaro, Non-ironically, incredibly delightful to listen to, and I think a lovely experimental album of sorts, so let's dive into it, why not? So D Crescendo, it opens up with the simmering ambience of field recordings. You get the cicadas trilling away incessantly with that natural and peculiar rhythmic style that just makes it such a distinct part of, Japanese culture, I feel, and field recordings. I feel like if anyone's watched, any anime, I feel, that is set in, Japan, you no doubt know what the sound is, right? But I think there's something cool about it on this, though. There's something very sublime about just hearing the ringing and trilling of the insects, And it places us, in this rather gentle soundscape, a perfect vision, of the streets of Japan as the buses slowly drive by, the pedestrians walk to their destinations as the clouds are looming overhead in the skyline and stuff. You get a real sense of place and time listening to this recording, which just places you in the epicenter of Japan itself, it feels, almost as though you're viewing it through some sort of odd filter, I feel, but even so, it's just lovely because everything's just drifting on by so peacefully. But what really elevates this track is, into this peculiar yet delightful world of ambience is, of course, when Juntaro starts playing the hapi drum. And so, what is a hapi drum? It's a rather small steel drum, where hitting upon it in various spots produces lovely resonating notes. And it's a charming instrument, and Juntaro, whether he is aware of it or not, just plays this really calming, soothing melody that's unlike anything I've come to expect from the Gerogerigegege. It's a melody that just drifts along, becoming so peaceful and soothing, just guiding you along this lovely meditative journey as you just, sit in the middle of these back streets, it feels like. Before I forget, though, to mention, though, the second track, the song's split up into 2 tracks basically on the A side and B side, and in the second one though, you get all the same things, happening from the first one, but it does feature one element that isn't on the A side, and that's when there's a brief moment where Juntaro Yamanouchi just coughs and is picked up by the recording equipment, which I believe is his phone, by the way, and then you get some laughter from somebody. And weirdly enough, it does form this little break in the sequence of the album, but I like it though because there's a charming human element to it, just people being people, Juntaro just coughing because something tickled his throat maybe, and then people, passing by like, oh look, there's a guy over there, playing the hapi drum and is coughing away, that's funny, right? Maybe so. It's interesting, I feel. But what surprises me about this record though is the incredibly subtle nature to it, Granted, field recordings is something we've seen from Juntaro before. Take, for example, the 1994 album Endless Humiliation, which is an hour-long recording of Juntaro quietly playing the piano, combined alongside field recordings of an interview with a homeless person who just seems to ramble on and on and on and on and on, essentially. And it's another very experimental release within the Gerogerigegege discography that is, I think, somewhat demanding to listen to as a record, but it's kind of fascinating in terms of what it's trying to present as well. And as a result of that, though, something like D Crescendo makes a lot more sense, I feel. It's still very different and so much more minimal than what I would ever expect from Juntaro, but it's delightfully minimal. The more it progresses, the more quieter and calmer the sounds become themselves. They're minimalist notions delving further into minimalism itself, it feels. And I love the subtleties though. Just how gentle a recording it is and how incredibly surprising one from the likes of Juntaro, but I think it kind of just adds the enigmatic qualities of this, very bizarre band that exists, A delightful meditative album from the Japanese ultra shit band. How bizarre and weird, right? And so what's exactly going on with this album then, we've mentioned that it's comprised of field recordings from A Visit to the Park and the Happy Drum, but luckily for us, a contributor to Rachel Music spent a lot of time delving into the particulars of the D Crescendo vinyl release, which apparently features a plethora of information from Juntaro himself, And although they weren't able to translate it literally word for word, they gave an amazing overview of what was essentially being expressed on the record, which gives us a lot of context for this release. And so, just to go briefly into the story, I would actually recommend go and read this guy's comic because it gives you so much context for everything. This is just a really brief overview we're going to do, but just for you viewers here today. So, sometime in 2018, but maybe before, we don't know, a friend of Juntaro Yamanouchi gives him the hapi drum. Impressed by his rather restrained style of playing the instrument, which is at odds to what he's normally known for, of course, right? Sadly, though, this friend passed away in 2018, which is, I feel, important context for this album. Following this, though, Yamanouchi became a little oddly obsessed with a children's book regarding a cellist named Gauch. And in particular, on one page is a particular drawing of a tanuki cub hitting Gauch's cello with a drumstick. And then apparently, just before dawn, on the 18th of the 9th in 2018, Juntaro goes to the park with his hapi drums and begins to record himself playing. And the result ended up being this rather existential experience for Juntaro, but it ends up being an incredibly unusual little moment of sheer chance where Juntaro exercises an incredible amount of restraint during his performance, where it's slowly just getting quieter and quieter, absorbed by the building of these field recordings happening all around him. But regardless of what's happening though, cars driving by, birds chirping, people laughing, insects going off, he continues to play it all the way to the very end. and it makes for this incredibly strange yet meditative performance pulled out this really unusual place in time. So yeah, as mentioned, there's a lot more to the story that I think is a little bit lost in translation here, but it's definitely worth checking out all the same if you want to learn a bit more about this, you know? In any case, what we're left with, though, is this really unusual little release within the Gerogerigegege discography that obviously so much more minimal and subtle than what we know from Juntara, as well as, I feel, expressing an element of vulnerability and melancholy throughout the performance as well, you know? Inspired by, you know, I would assume, the tragic passing of his friend, but as well as the story that Juntara became obsessed with, you know, attaching the very experience he had of recording this to the very illustration itself as well. Also, somehow, through coincidental circumstances, getting the right to use the picture for the album's release as well, which is really interesting, but kind of delightful as well, because the story clearly holds such a special place in Juntara's heart, and here he is able to express this weird experience with this picture, you know, combine it together just as he envisioned, if that makes sense. And it's odd though, it's an odd melancholy vibe. It makes a lot of sense with consideration to the passing of his friend, of course, and I feel as though maybe the whole D Crescendo project is perhaps some form of tribute to them in some way or form. Maybe a way of immortalizing someone through the use of creative endeavors, like I would argue anyway, maybe so. And so before we close off, when it comes to D Crescendo, there's actually been a number of different releases under this project, so let's briefly discuss them, why not? And so we've of course been looking at the original 2019 release, released on cassette and vinyl, but this was then also followed up with the incredibly strange release of D Crescendo Box, which was a limited edition box set comprising of 3 cassettes, and an actual stone, photographs of the recording location, as well as the hapi drum used apparently. And this version of the album, these 3 cassettes, mostly comprises of field recording and features little, if none, of the drum itself, apparently, according to commenters to Rate Your Music. I have to mention as well, though, when researching this, there is a copy of this available on Discogs for sale as I record this right now. Might still be there, don't know. With an asking price of around $1,000, if you can believe me, which is very strange, but Gerogerigegege collectibles, you know, they sure do demand some incredibly high prices for those die-hard fans, as they were in very limited numbers and stuff, and so only a handful of these things are released. But this one, I think, is fascinating though, as it combines, you know, a lot of elements that have gone into this version of D Crescendo is fascinating, you know, packages together a lot more of the concept behind the idea, cementing it in place and time to the park where he recorded the entire thing. And I think as well, giving it a lovely physicality with the drum itself and the stone itself, you know? Most likely taken from the recording location, I would assume. I think it's really cool, to be fair. It genuinely fascinates me, like, these kinds of special releases, you know, where there's a lot more than just the music, but these physical elements that are a part of it, if that makes sense. And before I forget, though, there is one final part to the project, which was D Crescendo Final Chapter, released on 2 CDs in 2022 apparently. And from what I've gathered, this is a bit of a reimagining of the project. You know, track 1 apparently offers up much of the same experience of the gentle field recordings and the hapi drum. But it's in the album's second track where he changes everything up, of course, and you know, the field recordings become bastardized into a harsh wall of noise as the hapi drum just plays alongside it. Remarkable, really. And maybe worth diving into if we decide to dive into Gerogerigegege again, of course, or maybe the Crescendo project. I feel like we're going to talk about more albums from Juntara at some point, because I just find them so interesting and fun. But I have to say, before finishing off though, I find it interesting that he's got this lovely set of field recordings and gentle albums and stuff, and then on the final version of it, the D Crescendo Final Chapter, the last track on the second disc, back to harsh walls of noise again. So typically Juntara, isn't it? Another joke on us as listeners, I guess, where he's like, oh yeah, I've got this one, I know what this project's like, and then suddenly, what's going on? So I think, yeah, we might as well just come to the end of our episode of Weird Music there, you know? As mentioned though, a genuinely delightful album within an incredibly uncomfortable caustic discography, and it's one that's actually steeped in a rather tragic backstory as well, you know. What I like here though is the level of experimentation and contemplation that's gone into the production of this recording, if you can call it a production, I guess. If you can call going to your local park with a drum and playing it gently a production. But you know what I mean. But after reading the story and finding out everything, I find it really easy to just imagine Jintaro Yamanouchi wandering the streets of Japan late at night, you know, small drum in hand, phone in the other, just seeing whatever it is he can come up with, you know. And here it's resulted in a very somber, melancholy little album that I think has a weird amount of weight and pathos to it, as well as being an incredibly pleasant one to listen to as well. I have to say though, when deciding to dive back into the Gerogerigegege, I was not expecting an album like this, truth be told. To be honest, I've actually been trying to write up a little review for Zanzuri Champion because one of the first albums I ever heard from the band, and it's one that I think is really bizarre but kind of funny as well. But then I happened upon D Crescendo and was like, I was kind of amazed by the experience, and so I really just wanted to write about it and, you know, let you guys know about this one because it's really incredible, I think. But as well, I think that's one of the delightful things about this band, you know, you never really know exactly what you're going to get. All you can do is just strap yourself in and see whatever effects happen from the listening experience itself. And so with that, I would like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. I wish you all the best. Take care and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.